Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Linda Henderson. Linda is a retired nurse with 37 years of experience in compassionate care. After the profound loss of her daughter, she found new purpose in helping others navigate the complex journey of grief. She holds certifications in professional grief and bereavement, coping with child loss, and grief and bereavement counseling. Linda is the author of The Road of Love and Hope and the creator of the AAA framework, Acknowledgement, Action, and Appreciation, offering guidance to those seeking hope after loss. She is a writer for Open to Hope online grief support, Compassionate Friends, and contributed a chapter to the book The Empowered Grief Journey, 23 Stories of Grief. Her work focuses on grief education, navigating the grief process, and creating safe spaces for healing. Through her speaking, writing, and advocacy, Linda ensures that no one walks the road of grief alone. She continues to honor Andrea's memory by helping others integrate loss into purpose and transform hope into a legacy. Linda, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. It's a pleasure having you on the program today.
Thank you, Dave, for that wonderful introduction.
Well, you're welcome. And we had reached out to each other on Facebook about potentially you being a guest on my podcast. And when I saw that you contributed a chapter in the Empowered Grief Journey anthology, I knew I had heard your name before because Chris Mamoni is the individual who coordinated that wonderful project. And when I saw your bio again, that really kind of just triggered my memory to realize that, yeah, I had heard your name well before we had made contact with each other.
Yes.
So from your bio, it sounds like you have a very full, very busy life. And I know that in talking to individuals who have found meaning through helping others with loss, it isn't due to professional choice. It's more to personal circumstance and tragedy. So I'd like you to tell our listeners about the experience or experiences that have shaped your life path and your passions today.
Well, first of all, my nursing career, during the 37 years, I experienced a lot, everything there is to know about death. And I held the hands of people as they passed on. I supported family members as they were going through their loss. And at the end of the day, I could just go home and say, thank God that wasn't me, But I experienced through my work, and my first time that I had to deal with grief in a personal way was when I lost my mom 30 years ago. I was a single mom at that time, and nobody adored their mom more than me. I mean, we had a fabulous relationship. I loved her with every beat of my heart. And I went through that grief. I took 2 weeks off work, I believe, and went back to work. And I struggled and just did what I knew I had to do and dealt with all the feelings. And that was my first time. And then I lost my daughter, Andrea. Andrea was 27 years old. She was pregnant with her second baby. She had a 2-year-old little boy at home. She was a social worker working in the community with the youth of our community, young girls between the ages of 13 and 17. And she was a teacher in their literacy program called the New Directions. So she helped those girls become good citizens in society. A lot of their work was in the community and taught them their reading. and she was happily married. They had just built their house 4 months before I lost her. And she was, I say, at the prime of her life. And on December 20th, 2011, she was in the community. They were a block away, returning to their place of employment, and they were stopped, waiting to turn left when a transport truck driver who was texting and driving hit them full speed from behind, pushed them into the oncoming traffic where they were hit yet again by another vehicle, T-bone. And Andrea was a passenger in the front seat and her coworker, and they were both killed instantly. And that was my second time to deal with grief. And that is what almost took me off this planet.
And first of all, my condolences for the loss of your mom and the loss of Andrea, and as somebody who themselves have experienced the death of a child, I can empathize deeply with the pain. And I know for me, it was like that loss just threw me into a world of hurt. It turned my world upside down and it had me question my values, my priorities. And I really had to do a long, deep dive into myself to determine what type of a life I was going to live without the physical presence of my daughter.
Absolutely. I remember not wanting to take the next breath, not wanting to breathe in a world without her. I remember saying that to my husband and lots of people that in those first weeks, days, weeks into months before my husband took a month off work to basically be my caregiver, I felt like I was a robot. I felt I was just existing. I could feel my heart beating and I knew that I was here, but I was not here. I was kind of like a near-death experience, living where wherever she was, that's where I wanted to be. And so I wasn't really aware of my physical existence. So my husband, told me when it was time to eat, when didn't have to tell me when it was time to sleep because I spent a lot of time in bed, but things like our normal activities of daily living, like, so when did you last shower? I have no idea. When did you last brush your teeth? All the things that we take for granted, none of those things, meant anything. They were just obsolete. They didn't mean anything. And so it was just an existence in those early days. And I remember, I don't like talking about this, but I think it's important. It was a pivotal moment in my journey that every day, the tears, the confusion, the chaos, and we just exist. And time has a way of moving us from day to day, week to week. And I believe this must have been about 3 months after losing Andrea and in the springtime. And I just disappeared. Nobody knew where I was. I took a walk to the end of the street to some old railroad area where nobody was really allowed to go. I took my bottle of wine in hand and I just went there. And I found myself this big, huge boulder and I sat down beside it and I consumed the contents. And in my turmoil, I said, I could end this right here, right now, at this moment. I could take away this pain because I couldn't picture dealing with it one more second. And I screamed and prayed to God and screamed, and that went on for a while. And I believe that God said, you know what? I'm not finished with you yet. So I walked back home and I decided that I was going to deal with grief. Didn't know how I was going to do it. Didn't know much about it, but I decided that I would deal with it and chip away at it one little piece at a time. And that's where I am today. And I do believe that God is not finished with me yet.
Yeah, I do believe that too. And I think every time I wake up, I realize that my mission isn't over on earth yet because I woke up another day.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like a make or break point in our grief where we decide, are we going to live or are we not going to live? Are we just going to waste away? And, I'm glad that you screamed out loud, you talked to God and you kind of heard the message say, I'm not done yet. And I'm going to get through this. I don't know how, but I'm going to get through it. But the thing is, and there was so much pain after my daughter Janine died. And I call it transition from the physical world to the spiritual world. But there was so much pain that I told God, I said, if you want eternity to start right now, I'm good with it. Because I don't know if I could go on another moment without the physical presence of my only daughter. And I had two sons. I had a granddaughter that, Janine gave birth to before she died. And I had a lot of good things in my life, but living without her was excruciating because I didn't know how to deal with this. I mean, there's no primer, there's no playbook for what happens when a parent has to bury a child. It's usually the other way around. The child buries the parent, carries
Well,
on
it's
to
out of
legacy of the parent.
it's out of the cycle of life. That's not how it's supposed to
Now,
be,
it's
right?
it's unnatural. Yeah, it's unnatural. So I told God, hey, I'm ready now. You can take me now. But
Mhm.
that request was met with deafening silence. And then gradually, with support, the other spiritual teachers that came my way who helped me embrace a different perspective on life, death, and life after death, I was able to re-engage in life and find meaning. But there was a time, Linda, I didn't want it. I was just ready to go now. I was ready to have
Yeah.
my life end. Let me be with my daughter for eternity because the pain was just so great.
It's so unbearable and you just don't want to deal with it and the thing is, I didn't want to die because like you said, I had so many people around me, a husband who was like the ultimate best. My other daughter, I had grandchildren, I had family around, and her son, Tristan, was two, and he was left behind. And I think that's what, I heard Andrea say to me too, what about Tristan, Mom? What about Tristan? How's he ever going to know about me? You need to love him for me.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I had so much to live for, and I did not want to die. I did not want to leave this world. I just wanted the pain to stop.
Yeah.
Doesn't stop. It stays forever. It's a matter of learning to grow with that pain, with that loss, and they both cohabitate in your heart. I didn't know that at the time. But time is a passageway that we travel through, and grief teaches us many things.
That's right. Pain and growth occur side by side. Joy and sadness, anger and happiness. I mean, all of those emotions. You can't have one without the other. Lightness without dark. You can't have one without the other. And
No.
we just learn to integrate it. We learn to live
Mhm.
with it, and we learn to learn from it. So I always ask individuals who have lost loved ones to tell us a little bit about your loved one. I know you told us a little bit about Andrea as far as her passion, her work, but tell us about Andrea, your daughter. What is it about her that made her who she is? And what do you remember most about her?
Andrea was the youngest of my two girls. I have a blended family now, but my two biological girls, she was my baby, my youngest. And growing up, she was a very quiet little girl, very shy. I remember one time I have a younger brother who brought his teenage friends home and, they're talking to her and she went and hid under the table when she was 4. Like she was just so shy and quiet. And she had curly blonde hair, and everywhere I went, she was a topic of conversation. She captured people with her beauty. And she was a joy to raise. She wasn't one of these difficult kids that, was defiant. And she was a very easy child to raise. I did the usual mother thing, putting them in all those different things, dancing, skating, whatever. And none of them really seemed to stick until she was about 7 or 8 years old. And we put her into horseback riding. Bingo. That was it. That was her passion. She loved horses. And as she grew, she was a reader and very studious. And there was not one thing that you could ask her about a horse or horse racing or horseback riding that she did not know. I remember one time we went to the racetrack in Toronto, for what it's called now, but it's a racetrack, huge. And I didn't know anything. I said, sure, we'll go. And they hand you this paper and it's got all the information about the horses. And she's trying to decipher everything and explain it all to me. But it was a joy because she was so knowledgeable She decided she wanted to be a journalist and went into social work. And because she was such a good reader and writer, she wanted to be a journalist. And when she did her first semester, she came home and she said, "No, this is not what I want. They're kind of stifling me. It's not what I wanted. I want to be able to say what I want to say." So it wasn't what she wanted. So social work is what she did. And that's where she landed. She was very kind. She grew into an adult woman the same as she was during her young childhood years. Patient, calm. She never rolled her eyes once at her child. She was the most patient, calm, sweetest mother. And I believe that's why she was in social work, because she was very loved and had patience and empathy with the girls there. So we had a bond. I was there when she had her baby, felt her baby kicking, was there. I babysat him when she went back to work. The paternal grandmother babies, I was doing community nursing, and the days that I was working, the paternal grandmother babysat, and then we flipped it back and forth. And so that's how close we were. We texted every day, we talked every day, and she was just my girl. We were very close.
Yeah, she just sounds like just a wonderful, very warm, compassionate,
Mhm.
engaging young woman, and I could see why you love her as much as you do. And I always say love in the present tense.
Oh,
And
I guess. I think I love her more now than ever. I always, knew that love grows. And I think it continues to grow even when you don't have your person here, or in my case, my child.
yeah, I mean, love never dies. The physical body may be gone,
Uh-huh.
but the spirit remains, and that love remains forever. And
Well, it's eternal. Love is
mm,
one of the greatest forces on the human planet, right? Love.
mm,
And our love and bond is is what guides me. It's the beacon in my pathway.
yeah, and I think that's something in terms, in talking to other individuals on the podcast and outside the podcast, it's all about it's all about leading with love, it's leading with compassion. It's about returning to those values that are
Yes.
going to help individuals see more similarity than they do differences with each other. And those are universal values that I'd love to see be adopted worldwide. Um,
For sure. Oh, for sure.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm,
What is it? What there's a song that says, "What the world needs now is love, sweet love."
yep. Yep.
Right.
And now more than ever, I do believe, Linda. So, um,
Absolutely.
now my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that Andrea's death was very public. There was a lot of coverage about her death. Am I correct?
Yes, it was. We live in a small, small town, but small enough. I don't know, maybe 18,000, something like that. And the town next to us is 40,000. But yeah, it was a highly publicized accident. I mean, the road, they had to reconstruct the accident as to what happened. It was on the radio a lot. It was continuous, and not advertised, but talking about when, you know, the court date would be, and charges, and yeah, it was very, very highly publicized in our area.
Can you speak to what that experience was like with you and the rest of your family to have her death publicized and, in a sense, have your grief become public?
It was, and saying her name all the time, as well as the name of her coworker, right? But saying the name, and, her age, and, every time they announced something, they had to announce the same thing over and over, right? It's just piercing to the heart, if you think about moving along with grief, there was no moving along with grief then. I believe it just kept us all frozen,
Yep.
right? And then it took 3 years before it went to court, and it was a 5-day trial, and I remember that, and I said, "I don't even know how I survived that." I would say next to the day that I had to deal with her death would be going through that trial because, they had telephone like experts, for all the cell phones, 3 different companies giving their things and then there was several times when I had to be removed from the courtroom and, just it was very, very very traumatic for everyone. But I was the one that there was once when I passed out, and so there was, concerns about everybody and how they were gonna handle it. How could they do this physically and mentally? How can you sit through that, right? And you can't say anything in the courtroom, and even if you're crying, you can't let any sound come with your tears. Everything has to be silent. It was no words, no words really. It was tough.
Yeah, and and the other thing, I think you made a good point. And I've talked to other individuals whose
Mhm.
children have been killed, and if there's like an accident or negligent homicide or whatever the charges would be, there was a court case. And I'm not saying this was in your case, but they told me that they were so focused on getting justice for their child that they put their grief on hold. And that after the trial was over and the disposition was over, the grief like just came back like a tsunami. It was just like the
Mhm.
floodgates opened.
Isn't that interesting? And, we all have our own journey and we each have
Yeah.
our own story, right? But for me, I was just grief stricken. And then it would be in the newspaper as well as on the radio, and we have the newspapers. And in the newspapers, it would be describing the 2 mothers, the grief stricken mothers. I don't even think that I was looking to the judicial system for any kind of healing or any kind of closure because at the end of the day, it didn't really matter because I'm the one that's imprisoned for life. It didn't
Yeah.
matter what happened. He got away a free man, by the way. So it was kind of tough letting that reality sit in the beginning. But like I said, at the end of the day, it does not
No.
really change anything.
And you're right, for those individuals that had a different experience than you, that put their grief on hold until they saw justice. Even if that person, let's say, got the maximum sentence allowable by the law, they would, I had a couple of people tell me, I thought it would make me feel better, but it
No,
didn't change a thing. It didn't change
no,
a thing for me.
I had that mindset, I think, going into it. And then I allowed myself to just feel what I had to feel within within the walls that I could.
Mm.
But I guess because I had said that to myself that I don't have Andrea. I don't have Andrea. Doesn't matter about him. I don't have Andrea. Right.
Yeah.
So, pushing it forward where he walked out, lit up a cigarette, and went on to be a free man. It was devastating at the time, but it didn't take long for me to just move along with that
Mm.
because I figure, you know what? In time, he's got to live with it. He's got to live with it.
Yep. Yep. Now you still have, obviously you still have contact with Tristan, Andrea, your
Yeah.
grandson, but I
Yeah.
understand it was a struggle in the beginning.
It was a struggle. I believe grief played a big role in the lives of everybody involved. And, because we were so close to Andrea and her husband and Tristan, and, we were a close knit family with the babysitting, they would come for dinner and whatnot. In that first few years during that time frame, really when the court battle was going on, it was a struggle to see Tristan, and we weren't able to see him very often. And it just progressed to the point where we needed to do something legally about it. So there are no grandparent laws in Ontario. And we needed access. We needed to know that we could have access to him because basically he was my little piece of it. He is my little piece of Andrea.
Yep.
And if I can't see him, I said, if I can't see him, I might as well die. And I didn't care if we remortgaged the house. I didn't care. I just needed to see him regularly. So, we were told by the lawyers she would bring us different case studies and whatnot. And, of course, how unusual is it, right? Usually it's children with marriage breakups, not a situation like this where a parent is gone, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, in the end, we won, and we have a wonderful relationship with him today because of that.
And how old is Tristan now?
He will be 17 in April.
Wow.
Yes. And we have a wonderful relationship with him. So, that warms my heart. It's always bittersweet. Life is bittersweet anyway. Looking at him, as looking at him, you have a grandchild. Seeing his face, seeing him smile, he has Andrea's quiet personality. He's clever like her, just like his mom. And so I'm I'm proud to say that, but at the same time, it kind of pulls at those heartstrings of, man, I wish she was here, right?
Well, yeah, and especially, and I know for me, after Janine transitioned, I was grieving not only for myself, but I was grieving for my granddaughter because she wasn't young enough. She was to grieve, so I was doing double duty, and it was like a double-edged sword. I was
How
grieving
old?
for she's 20, going to be 24 in May, but at the time that Janine transitioned, she was only 10 months old. So
Oh,
I was doing double duty. I was grieving for both of us, and
oh, I know that feeling. I know that feeling. I think I
yeah,
still do to this day.
and that drains our energy even more because because grief is physically exhausting anyway. But when you're grieving for more than one, and I was grieving for my wife, I was grieving for my her two brothers, I was grieving
Yeah.
for my granddaughter. Linda, it was exhausting.
It's completely exhausting. Completely. More exhausting than anything I've ever encountered in my life. And it's hard work. It's hard work when you reach that pivotal moment and you say, I'm gonna do this.
Mhm.
I'm gonna work through it. But it's such hard work
Yep, yep,
and exhausting. You're right.
yeah, it is exhausting. Now I know you wrote a chapter for the Empowered Grief Journey anthology, but I also want to talk about your book, The Road of Love and Hope, The Journey of Child Loss, and what you want readers to take away from it. The cover also struck me too, and I believe that is a picture of you, am I correct?
That
Walking
is
down and what looks to be an endless road. So,
absolutely. When I wrote the book, I mean, as we know, the journey of the loss of anyone that we love, in my case, child loss, you're walking down this road, you're on this path, and you don't know where you're going. And so, that's how I wanted the cover to depict what was inside the book. And it was me walking on this pathway, boulders on either side of me, no definition to where I'm walking because there's no definition to the path that you're walking on with grief. You could turn left, right, go straight ahead, turn around, go backwards. It's just all so confusing. So it's a path that's undefined, lots of rocks, not an easy walk. But when you look ahead, you see the sky, and the sky is dark. But with every dark day and all the dark clouds, the sun will always shine. So there's rays of sunshine shining through the clouds. So giving an indication of hope, the road of love and hope.
so yeah, just before we get into the content of your book, looking at that picture reminded me of one meme and one quote that I always rely on. The meme I saw was on Facebook is that sometimes you find yourself in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes in the middle of nowhere you find yourself. And watching you walk that lonely road kind of reflected
That's
that for me.
so true. Yeah, that's a good quote. That is a good
Yeah.
quote for sure. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, after all our hard work, I did find myself. I'm a new version of me, but
Mm.
I did find myself. So that's
Yep.
true.
And the other thing, and I always quote Neil Peart, who I always believe is one of Canada's favorite sons, the late great drummer for Rush, and he had his own tragedies in the late '90s, which you may be aware of. His daughter was killed in a one-car accident in 1997. I think she was 18 or 19 at the time, and his wife was died of stomach cancer 10 months later, which he believed was related to the stress of losing their daughter. So he went on 55,000-mile road trip on his motorcycle to the United States, Canada, Mexico to basically find himself. And one of the things he said was, keep moving, something will come up. Keep moving, something will come up. And that's the other quote.
That's so true, right?
Yeah, that when I saw that you walking on that limitless road.
Keep on walking, just
Yeah.
keep on walking,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
so true. We have to move our body. We have to do something. We have to, get off the couch. We have to move ourselves, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us what's in the book.
Well, I decided, I don't know anything about writing books. I was a nurse for 37 years and far from writing, right? And all our documentation was by hand. And I knew nothing about computers, really aging myself. But it was just near the end of my career that they started introducing computers. So I knew nothing about computers. I knew nothing about Word. And so when I sat down to write, I said to my husband, "Well, I don't know how to write. Like, what am I supposed to do? Just keep on." We were saying walking, just write, just keep on writing. Just, open the document in Word and just keep on writing, right? So that's what I did. And I decided that I wanted the title right away, The Road of Love and Hope. I always describe Andrea and my story as our love story. So it's about love, right? It's about love. Yes, it's about death, but it's about love. And, hope is always there even when we don't see it or feel it, but it's always there. So I wanted the book to be basically about that road. So, like, the opening chapter is the big boulder, and that's the day that it happened. And then the rest of the book just kind of followed along the guidelines of like a roadmap and, what are some tools that you need. And at the end of each chapter, I put a little quotation box called Just for Today. So after you read that chapter, and then this is just a little bit of food for thought type of deal, right? And so it was kind of just based on navigating a journey, walking the road, and how do we deal with that? And I put a lot of information in there about grief because, just I wanted it to be relatable. Like if I was sitting down talking to somebody who had just lost their child or their person, this is how you're going to feel. These are your feelings. And, this is what grief does to you, but these are some of the things you can do. And so I just wanted it to be relatable.
Yeah, I think the more relatable, and particularly for individuals in early grief who have difficulty processing large chunks of information,
Oh,
complex chunks of information,
for,
simple
sh-
is better.
for sure. Because when I started writing, well, in those first 6 months, I was born and raised in a Christian home. So, I believed in heaven. There was no doubt about that. But I just wanted to read books for some reason, about near-death experiences. I wanted to read about people and it's like I wanted to reach out and touch heaven.
Yeah.
I wanted to reach out and read what they had to say about heaven, and just kind of to confirm, I guess, everything that I believed. And so one of the books that I was reading was, I forget what it's called, but it was written by a psychologist or psychiatrist. And I kind of browsed through it and thought, oh, Linda, you were a nurse for 37 years. You're going to be able to understand all that jargon, all that medical jargon. Don't worry about it, right? That's what I'm telling myself. And I think I got into the first chapter and it was like, oh, I can't deal with this. My grief brain, I can't go there, right? So fast forward when I decided to write my book, that's why I wanted to make it relatable.
Yeah. And, relatable and information that individuals could easily wrap their heads around.
Right, right. To digest,
Yeah.
right? Because, in the beginning, like you say, in those early days, the early season of grief, I call it, your brain just can't handle it, right? It's only little pieces at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, like I know you are also a writer for the Open to Hope Foundation, and what I like about Open to Hope is that they have very short, concise, but impactful articles. You can get great information in like 800 to 1200 words. And sometimes that's all we can process in early grief is that many words.
That is so true. That is so true. Absolutely.
Now, we mentioned in your bio about the AAA framework. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about how that framework evolved and how that can empower individuals who are facing grief and adversity.
Well, it's been 14 years. And, through those years, as yourself, I'm sure, there are many people that say, so how have you done this? Like, how have you survived this long? What have you done? Like, how did you make it? Right. And so I thought I need to just come up with some idea. I need to think about what I did. What has my life been over the last 14 years? Right. So I realized that the AAA framework, which is simple, three pillars that help me up and help me cultivate hope in my life, was acknowledgement, action, and appreciation. And the acknowledgement is that we need to acknowledge our pain. We need to acknowledge our tears. We need to acknowledge our anger, all of our emotions, all of it. Because society tells us that, yeah, you can show those emotions for a little while. And what do you get? 3 days off work and you have to go back to work and and you just have to kind of put it in a little box and put it on the shelf and leave it there and say, okay, I've dealt with it now. Well, no, you need to acknowledge it. And you need to acknowledge everything that grief has done to your body, because grief is a whole body experience. It impacts us emotionally, physically, cognitively, socially, spiritually, in every way. And, we need to acknowledge the grief and without any guilt or without any explanation. And, you shed those tears, and if you have to do it in public, so be it,
Yeah.
and not hide the grief. It needs to be, it's basically facing grief head on. And for whatever duration of time that takes, everybody is different. And by acknowledging the grief, it moves us into actions like we're talking about moving our body and setting small, tiny, attainable goals. Like in the early days with me when my husband went back to work and I couldn't remember anything. So he told me, write down. If you can't remember something, write it down. So I remember one of the first things I did when he went back to work is I wrote down shower. Something so simple, but I wasn't going to remember. And so that tiny little goal, it was achievable. And if I couldn't do it, the other thing to remember is that if you can't do those actions, you know what? It's okay. You can try again. But I remember showering, and when he came home, I was like, just so proud of myself that guess what I did today. So setting tiny, small, achievable goals. And it's the baby steps, right? Even if it means that you have cried and cried all morning and you get up and you're able to make a cup of coffee and you feel the warmth from that coffee, or you step outside to get a bit of fresh air, you move your body, tiny actions, and those actions build. Those actions, the more we do one, maybe the next time we can do two. And then gradually, the more actions and movement that we bring into our life, then appreciation and gratitude, life creeps in and hope comes in, and appreciation and grief has taught me many, many things. And one of the biggest things that grief has taught me is that life is very fragile.
Yep.
Life is precious and it needs to be not taken. You need to value it, not take it for granted. There's many times when we're traveling and I'll say to my husband, stop the car. There's flowers on the side of the road, right? And so I take the pictures and I come in. He said, you're taking pictures of weeds. And I'm like, but look at them. They're beautiful. It's appreciation and valuing the moment, the present moment that we're in. And that's what basically acknowledgement, action, and appreciations are. And doing all of those things bring you closer to hope. Hope creeps in and life, starts new again.
Yeah, it sounds like a gradual framework. People can progress through the
Yeah.
three A's at their own pace.
Mhm.
And I like the acknowledgement part because what you acknowledge doesn't have any control over you any longer. You've got it out in the open. You acknowledge what's
Mhm.
happening. You acknowledge the consequences. You acknowledge what you've experienced.
Mm.
and it no longer
Well,
holds,
you gain control back. Grief has less of a hold on you. And
yeah,
it validates when we acknowledge our pain and our anger and our fear. And it validates, this happened to me. It validates that I lost my girl. I lost my Andrea. It validates everything. Right. So it's a slow process, but it is a process that I went through. And I think it's a guideline, right,
yeah,
that I happily give.
yeah. And our grief journey is a process, and you're right, it isn't, it isn't put in a nice little box and put away after a period of time. It's just, it's going to take as long as it takes for us to get from the raw pain of grief to acceptance of the fact that our life is what it's going to be without the physical presence of our loved ones, but we're still going to re-engage in life and be of as much service as we can as a result of the challenges of what's happened to us. So I want to throw out just a phrase for you, just have you respond to this. The importance of community after loss. Share your thoughts about that.
Very important. It takes a brave person, in their pain and suffering to reach out, but it's part of the healing journey. Community, having people, connections is part of the healing journey. I think it's really important to reach out, and like in my case, I was part of a mother's group. That was before Zoom, and we met in person. And to be around like-minded people who were dealing with the same things, it gave comfort and support, and it was helpful. But, community, it's so important. After writing my book, I've connected with so many groups and people like yourself, and, it helps to dissipate the loneliness, because grief is very lonely. And it is, at the end of the day, it's your personal lonely loss. But the isolation, it breaks the isolation when you're part of the community of people. Not necessarily everybody has to have experienced what you're experiencing, but to be around empathetic people, family members, friends, larger into the community, groups. I think it's part of the healing journey. It's necessary.
Yeah, I know I couldn't have made it in the early phases of grief without a good parental bereavement support group, the support of concerned friends, other family members. I couldn't have made that without that community. And still, even 23 years later, I still have community. My community looks different now than it did in
Yeah.
early grief, but that's also
Yeah.
part of the evolution of grief, is that
Yeah.
our communities are going to be different depending on where we are and depending on what perspective we've embraced. But I still couldn't have made it this far without community, without other people around me. That includes not only those individuals who have been supportive of me outside of my teaching, but also my students who are always a consistent supportive community every semester. And, so that's how I've gotten this far today. And that's going to continue to get me where I need to be.
Absolutely. And all the connections with doing podcasts and just community, a community of bereaved people that I know. I have healed more in the last 3 years since I've written my book because of that, because I didn't have it to that broad extent before,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had my support group that I did, and I saw my family doctor regularly when she was wonderful. And I had the same counselor for 9 years. Some people used to say, "You're still in counseling?" Yeah, I am. You have a problem with it? Yes, I am. The same counselor for 9 years. And I could go there and feel safe and cry my tears and talk about how last week was horrible, or talk about how last week was really good.
Yeah.
And I think counseling, when the person is ready for it, it's very important too.
Particularly after traumatic loss, like you experienced with Andrea, sudden death, unexpected accident that suddenly took her life, and individuals that have died by suicide, homicide. A good
Yeah.
therapist can help individuals and families navigate the very unique circumstances that are related to those causes of death. So, Linda, you've left us with a lot of good stuff today, but I'm going to ask you to leave us with one more thing.
Okay.
If you're going to leave our listeners with the ultimate takeaway for today, what would that be?
Well, one of them I mentioned already about hope. Hope is always there, even when we don't feel it, it's always there. But my new motto that I have created for myself, and I actually write it in my books because it's what I do and it's what I believe in. And it's embrace the moments. Embrace the moments because those moments that you have, the moments that we have with our family, with our loved ones now, eventually become memories. But embrace the moments, and whatever those moments look like for you. If, as I said, you're crying and you can manage to get your breath, embrace that moment and have a drink of water in the early days. Embrace the moments of whatever they may be. Your child laughing, your grandchild laughing, whatever. Embrace that warm sun. When I go to the beach, I put my feet in the water and I wiggle my toes, and I embrace those moments, and I tell Andrea, I'm doing this for you. So embrace the moments, cherish the memories, because those memories are moments that we shared with our loved one, and that will bring hope for tomorrow.
Thank you for that, Linda. And my last question for you, if people want to purchase your book, contact you directly, what's the best way for them to do that?
My book is available on Amazon under Linda Henderson, The Road of Love and Hope. My author page is authorlindahenderson.com, and the book can be purchased from there. I also published a book that Andrea wrote in high school when she was in grade 11, and that's available on Amazon and through my website as well.
And I will make sure all of your contact information gets in the episode notes, and it'll be seen once we go live. So, Linda, thank you so much for just a great conversation today. I truly enjoyed it, and I have a feeling we're going to be having conversations in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy talking about my love story with Andrea. And if I can help just one person, then it's all worth it.
Agreed. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.